Take your phone calls on that. But first, we're starting tonight with our front burner story. President Barack Obama's first visit to CIA headquarters just days after he released some top secret memos on interrogating terror suspects. That didn't sit too well with some of the agency's top brass, so you wouldn't think he'd get a warm reception from the rank and file. Well, check this out. Big response there. Senior White House correspondent Ed Henry is here. Now, Ed, tremendous reaction to the president's arrival. Pretty unusual stuff for the CIA.
It really was, Roland, because you normally see these CIA officials being very reserved, very calm and cool, and it was sort of like a rock star reception. I think there are a couple things at work here. First of all, the other part of that whole controversial torture story last week is that beyond releasing the memos, the president said something else, which is he's not planning to pursue criminal prosecutions of any CIA officials who may have been involved in this. That basically they were told by Bush officials it was legal, these interrogation techniques, so they should be off the hook. That's obviously very popular with CIA officials who had been nervous about whether they would face criminal charges. Secondly, the president said something else in his remarks. He was basically saying that because he's ended these tough interrogation techniques, it's almost like the CIA has one arm tied behind his back. It's tough to do its job against al-Qaeda and other terror organizations, but the president said in the long run, the U.S. is going to be much better for it. Take a listen.
What makes the United States special and what makes you special is precisely the fact that we are willing to uphold our values and our ideals even when it's hard. Not just when it's easy. Even when we are afraid and under threat. Not just when it's expedient to do so. That's what makes us different. So yes, you've got a harder job. And so do I. And that's okay.
And finally, the president made another important point, which is that he said, look, a lot of CIA officials, they get the blame when something bad goes wrong, if there's, God forbid, a terror attack or something like that. But they never really get credit when something goes right because it's kept classified. It's under wraps. And when he said that, someone in the crowd shouted out, amen. And the president joked there's sort of an amen corner over at the CIA, Roland. I think that's clearly part of the reason why he got such a good reception there, Roland.
Hey, I want to bring in some other folks to talk about President Obama's relationship with the CIA. Here with us is CNN national political correspondent Jessica Yellen and syndicated columnist Miguel Perez. He joins us right here in New York. And in D.C., Cliff May from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. And Jess, I want to start with you. Of course, we're hearing all these things about interrogation techniques, things along those lines. What can you tell us in terms of this response, what we're hearing from the CIA, but also Capitol Hill?
One of the troubling things that's developed for President Obama is in one of these memos, it was revealed that 266 times two individuals were waterboarded. So just two suspects got it 266 times. One suspect 183 times in 1 month alone. Now, the problem for President Obama here is that for the critics of his position that we should not prosecute folks in the CIA for waterboarding, this emboldens the liberals to say, look, how can you say 183 waterboardings in 1 month is not torture? And so they're saying we should take a second look. We should think about prosecuting.
Hey, Cliff, what about that? Former head of the CIA, Michael Hayden, he says, look, this made us safer. There are memos showing that. And so what Jessica just said, that number, is that considered excessive if it worked?
Yeah, I mean, look, if 183 times you had a poker put through your eyes, which is really torture, or had your nails pulled off, you wouldn't survive it. It sounds like this was a guy for whom waterboarding was not that rough because he was able to get used to it and, I guess, not break. Look, I think it's fine to outlaw waterboarding. Congress could have done it at any point they wanted to. They didn't. Congress was briefed about waterboarding. We also learned that when they were doing things like pushing terrorists up against walls, they were doing it against flexible walls so they wouldn't get hurt. They were doing it with collars on them so their neck wouldn't be hurt by that. And even with the waterboarding, there were very strict rules, evidently, about how often it could be done. Look, I think there's two things to ask. What actually works? And of the things that work, what are we willing to do?
Right.
I think you have to distinguish between harsh methods of interrogation and torture. Everything that is uncomfortable to a terrorist under interrogation, I don't believe is torture.
Miguel, you sat here and began to shake your head when Cliff said, waterboarding, not that tough.
It's torture. And one time is torture. You don't have to do it 187 times. You can only do it once, and it's torture, and it should be banned. And the president was right for releasing the memos detailing this information. And he's also right, I believe, for not prosecuting the CIA people who were involved. We don't want to keep washing our dirty laundry, letting the whole world know what we have been doing. It's enough that we've admitted it already, but that's enough.
Jessica, real quick.
Dianne Feinstein, senator who runs the Intelligence Committee, is disagreeing with the president, and she sent him a letter today saying, hold off on your decision not to prosecute. Let's decide. This was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed who got 183 waterboardings in 1 month. You know, bad guy, but still, she wants to see if prosecution might still be an option.
Welcome back to the White House. Ed, you questioned the administration, questioned the president regarding the prosecution. What did they say?
Well, I was pressing Robert Gibbs here today in the briefing room and saying, look, there are, as Jessica's pointing out, some critics on the left now who normally support this president saying, look, if you're going to go to the trouble of putting these memos out there, having people like General Hayden say in charge that you're making the country less safe, why then would you not take the extra step of pursuing criminal prosecutions? Robert Gibbs is basically saying, look, we don't want to look backward. We want to look forward. They basically think it's going to take a lot of time to go through what really went wrong, what happened. But the fact of the matter is the people who are upset about what happened in the past want some answers. And I think that's why, as Jessica pointed out, Senator Feinstein is saying not so fast.
Hey, Ed, hold on. The president, folks, has a lot more than the CIA on his mind these days. This morning, he met for the first time with his cabinet and gave them some bad news. He wants to cut $100 million from their budgets. Here's what he said.
So what we're going to do is line by line, page by page, $100 million there, $100 million here. Pretty soon, even in Washington, it adds up to real money.
So, Ed, exactly what is the president asking his cabinet to do? I mean, paper clips, I mean, staples, what?
Actually, there is some of that, Roland. The Department of Homeland Security is saying they're going to start buying office supplies in bulk, and this is going to save over the next decade, you know, tens of millions of dollars. You got the Veterans Affairs Department saying they're going to cut back on some 26 conferences they were going to have around the country. Instead, they're going to keep their people here in D.C. and do it by video conference. So, look, you can save some pocket change like that, and even $100 million really is pocket change when you compare it to a $1.3 trillion budget deficit. But I think the point the president is trying to make, this is what top White House officials are saying here, is that the symbolism of it, just like back years ago when people shamed the Pentagon for buying $600 toilet seats, Robert Gibbs was saying today the same kind of symbolism about cutting back on small things could make some major changes. Here's how the president put it.
We also have a deficit, a confidence gap when it comes to the American people. And we've got to earn their trust. They've got to feel confident that their dollars are being spent wisely.
But it's interesting to see, Roland, how the president's arguments are sort of shifting here near the end of the first 100 days. Remember at the beginning of the first 100 days when they're trying to push through that massive stimulus bill, every time Republicans on the Hill kept saying, look, there's $100 million for contraceptive use, or there's $100 million to resod the National Mall. They're pulling out these pork projects. The president and his aides kept saying, look, $100 million, that's chump change. That's only less than 1% of the whole bill. Why are you making a big deal out of it? Now the argument has flipped, and all of a sudden they're saying, well, maybe $100 million matters, Roland.
All right, Ed, thanks so much. We certainly appreciate it. Let's quickly turn to the chief business correspondent, Ali Velshi. Ali, what's going on with the $100 million? Big deal or grandstanding?
I think Ed hit it on the head. It is, it's symbolic. Let's talk about it. Ed said it was part of a $1.3 trillion deficit. Let's talk about it in terms of the whole budget. I love these big numbers. $3.67 trillion is the size of the federal budget, and they are talking about cuts of $100 million. Now, what does that amount to? Let's make that into something that's more relevant to you. Let's take, instead of $3.7 trillion, let's take a one of these Chrysler vans, which, if you get the Sirius satellite radio in it, will cost you $36,700. What would the equivalent cut be if you were negotiating with the salesman on that one? It would be $1. That would be $1 off a $36,700 car. It is not statistically significant. It's not important, but it is significant in terms of symbolism. The fact is, this $100,000. It's not like President Obama is saying to the departments, "You got to come up with $100 million amongst you all." He is saying, in addition to the cuts that are going to be made to try and bring these deficits under control, we want you to find an extra $100 million that you are spending in places that might be careless. So, on that sense, it is symbolic. It's a message, but it is not statistically significant at all.
All right, Ali, thanks so much.
All right.
Now, folks on Wall Street, that $100 million is definitely chump change. Listen to this. ExxonMobil is now on the top of the new Fortune 500 list. It made $442.85 billion in revenue last year. Of course, $4 gas probably helped. Remember that? Also, last year's number one, Walmart, got bumped to the number two spot. It only made $405.6 billion in revenue last year. To find out who else is in the Fortune 500, folks, go right now to CNNmoney.com. Now, a UN conference against racism turned into chaos today just as it was getting started. The president of Iran was making a speech, and when he speaks, trouble often follows. Watch this.
اشغالی فلسطین برپا کردند و در واقع
We'll tell you why the walkout happened, and we'll be joined back with Cliff, Jessica, and Miguel in just 2 minutes.
No bias, no bull. Brought to you by Microsoft People Ready Enterprise Solutions. Because it's everybody's business.
You guys are more interested in chocolate chips than microchips. What's technology's role here?
The way I think technology really fits is in making connections.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's an incredible amount of knowledge in Nestle, but it requires one of our scientists in Sri Lanka to talk to one of our marketing people in Brazil, and ultimately with a product technologist in Russia. I do see us connecting much more internally. That's where I see huge opportunities to save money and be more innovative.
I absolutely love playing badminton. Started playing after 30 years again, and it's wonderful. It keeps me young. My shoulder sometimes hurts, and my doctor said I was overusing my knees. And I said, well, that's not the answer I want to hear. A leave makes me pain-free, so I can move on the court. And you can't play this game if you can't move on the court and get to the bird and return it. I'm Anne-Marie Donahoe, and with a leave, I'll never stop playing badminton.
Okay, we're all tightening our belt in this economy. Maybe it's time to tighten this belt, your supply chain. UPS can help you consolidate warehouses, bypass distribution centers, and reduce your inventory, giving you a new streamlined supply chain that saves big money and really delivers. Because this economy is showing us something. It's time to rely on the efficiency of UPS. That's the tight-looking belt.
Now more than ever, see what Brown can do for you.
We are here to honor ordinary people, but they're doing extraordinary things.
Know the next CNN Hero of the Year? Nominate your hero today at cnn.com/heroes. Sponsored by the Children's Safe Drinking Water Program.
The true story of two freshman representatives video blogging for CNN.com. Freshman Year, CNN.com's new exclusive online blogumentary.
I just lay down on this little cot here and calling constituents back.
Watch it only at CNN.com/freshman year.
Folks, the World Racism Conference was just getting started this morning in Geneva when the president of Iran took the stage and delivered a racist rant aimed at Israel. Listen to what happened next.
And they sent migrants from Europe, the United States, and from other parts of the world in order to establish a totally racist government in the occupied Palestine. And in fact, in compensation for the dire consequences of racism in Europe, okay, please, thank you. And in fact, in compensation for the dire consequences of racism in Europe, they helped bring to power the most cruel and repressive racist regime in Palestine.
Well, folks, we're back. Jessica Yellen, Miguel Perez, Cliff May, and Ed Henry are back with me. And, of course, Ed, the White House took a lot of criticism for not going to this conference. What are they saying now?
They feel pretty good. They're essentially, top White House officials are saying, we told you so, that this whole conference was a bad idea. That's why they didn't attend. They think it's reprehensible that you had the Iranian president taking shots not just at Israel, but some of our allies in Europe as well. I think the bigger long-term question, though, that's sort of an easy one to fire back at him. But the bigger long-term question is, what does this mean for the U.S. outreach to Iran? They've been trying to crack that door open. If he continues to make statements like this, it's going to be hard for the U.S. to continue to reach out, Roland.
Miguel, one speech. How does this one speech define the entire conference?
It doesn't define the entire conference, but it's the same pattern. I mean, these guys don't change. They hate us, and they're going to keep hating us, and they're going to let the world know.
So these guys meaning Iran?
Iran, yes. And Hugo Chavez, who is a friend of Ahmadinejad, is also, whatever you pronounce it.
Ahmadinejad.
Ahmadinejad.
Same as Blagojevich.
Thank you very much. You know, it's the same thing all over again. It's this hatred of America that we keep seeing over and over again, and they're not going to change. They want us dead. They want Israel to disappear from the map, and they insist. You know, there are some very naive people in this world who insist that we can make, you know, sing kumbaya with people who want us dead. It's impossible.
Cliff May, of course, we also saw the conviction of the journalist, Roxanne Sabiri. So how does that make it even more difficult? And should the president do more to try to get her released from prison? She was sentenced to 8 years.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. She's an American citizen. She's of Iranian background. She's been imprisoned unfairly, and I would hope there'd be great pressure to get her out. Look, the president continues to reach out to Iran's despots who rule the place, and he keeps getting his hand slapped back. At a certain point, and I think it's good that he's doing what he's doing, but at a certain point, he's going to, I think, have to use something harsher than simply reaching out. There are going to have to be strong sanctions at the very least in order to get the attention of Iran and show that we not only speak softly, but we also sometimes carry a big stick.
Jessica, Cliff talks about reaching out, and we saw him reaching out in terms of the photo with Chavez. And so what's the fallout from that particular image?
Well, that's a potentially dangerous image for President Obama, but only in terms of domestic politics, because you can just imagine the Republican campaign in which they start unveiling this photo and say that the president is weak already. Newt Gingrich and Dick Cheney, the former vice president, have said it's a proof that President Obama is weak. But as they like to say, the proof is in the pudding. And it really depends on whether President Obama gets results out of his new strategy of nice.
Hey, Ed, what about that? I mean, was he supposed to just somehow avoid shaking his hand or slap it around?
Well, the president's response basically was that, look, Chavez, the Venezuelan president, is better at getting his face in front of the camera, and that he essentially sort of staged some of these photo ops. I think the White House makes a fair point when they say, look, former President Bush kept pushing back against Venezuela. What did they do? They kicked out the U.S. ambassador to Venezuela. There was really no diplomatic relations. Now, all of a sudden, maybe there's an opening. They hope something comes out of it. But as Jess points out, if all this blows up in the president's face and he really doesn't get anywhere with it, it's going to be a video highlight for the RNC to use in the years ahead. There's no doubt about that.
Miguel.
I like the approach Obama is using, and I'll tell you why. Here's a liberal American president who is going to Latin America and saying, you can be liberal, you can even be a socialist, and you don't have to put your opposition in jail. You don't have to be totalitarian to be a liberal. You can have free elections and be a liberal. He disarms them just by being himself. And that's why Chavez and Ortega and the Castros, they don't know what to do with Obama. They really don't know how to deal with him. They would prefer George Bush in the White House so they can say American Yankee imperialist. Obama doesn't look or act like a Yankee imperialist.
Jessica, you have a real interesting story in terms of Bush reaction, Obama reaction.
Right, I remember being at the same Summit of the Americas with President Bush 2 years ago, and Hugo Chavez walks into the room, and the entire room swarms around Hugo Chavez. President Bush avoids him completely, looked completely alone.
So like a dance going on.
A dance like you went like celebrities when Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman walk into the
on
Oscars.
On red carpet.
Separately.
Keep them separate. Hey, Cliff, too much reaction from the right and saying, oh, this was a bad move. I'm reading all kind of stuff. People are saying, oh, he shouldn't have shaken his hand, should not have taken the book. I mean, so what are he supposed to do? Just say, get away from me?
No, look, I think it's fine to shake the guy's hand. I wish he hadn't seemed quite as thrilled to meet him, quite as smiling. And I think it would have been okay to also say something in defense of the people who have been imprisoned, the political prisoners in Venezuela's jails, the people who have been imprisoned by Daniel Ortega, the people who have been imprisoned in Bolivia. Speaking out on behalf of freedom and democracy is something I would like to see our president continue to do. So I'm not against him shaking hands. but I wish he had a little bit of criticism and a little bit of support for the people who are oppressed by these dictators.
Well, sometimes they say killing with kindness. We certainly appreciate it. Thanks a bunch. Miguel, Jessica, Cliff May, and Henry, thanks a bunch. Also, folks, a program note. Tomorrow night, I'll talk to the father